Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be doing this. I'm actually a bit nervous. And as you'll see today, what we're going to go through, what I'm going to be teaching you today, no doubt that through this process that I'm really practicing walking my talk and doing what it takes. So I want to tell you all, I appreciate you all so much for being here. And I endeavor to have everything that I offer you today be something that's truly useful and beneficial. So let us all begin together, just taking a moment. If you're in a place where you can close your eyes and draw your attention to your breathing. So with eyes closed, drawing attention to your breathing. Become aware of the space behind you, the space beneath you, the space in front of you. Become aware of the sky above you with your attention on your breathing as you take your attention to the space below you. Take this time now, if you will, and just imagine that roots of your awareness are extending downward toward the core of the earth. As you stay present to the rise and fall of your breathing. Together we begin this sacred time today acknowledging the presence of all saints, sages, gurus, teachers, and masters. May our minds be wise and clear. May our intention be pure. And may our hearts be merciful and loving. Namaste. So again, thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate your support, and I appreciate us all coming together in this learning opportunity. And so today, as part of this success course, or to kick off this success course, what I want to offer to you are in the beginning, are the phases of the student. The phases of the student, particularly the student of life. Quintessentially, this is what the yoga student truly is, the student of life. And like anything else, when we begin something, the first phase is the honeymoon phase. And I think we all know what the honeymoon phase is. The honeymoon phase of anything. We start anything new. Maybe some of you out there are starting a new venture in one way or the other. Maybe you're in a new job, potentially new relationship, whatever the case may be. There's always that honeymoon phase. And primarily I'm speaking in terms of yoga training, leadership training, training for personal transformation and evolution. So the honeymoon phase. This is the place where we're so inspired. Everything is fresh and new. You see such amazing and big possibilities for yourself. And you just start to see that there's more for you, that there's a greater potential. And then like any great honeymoon phase, the object of whatever it is that you are working with, or the teachings, or whatever it is that you're focused on, it's like it can do no wrong. Everything's perfect. Everything's perfect about the training, everything's perfect about the teachers, everything's perfect. And so that's the honeymoon phase, and quite naturally a stage that we must all go through. Now the next phase may not come to any surprise to you, but I call it the familiarity stage. The stage where we become familiar. So from the honeymoon phase, that initial excitement, that fresh and new, that new inspiration, from the honeymoon phase, we go into the stage of familiarity. The stage of familiarity is where the honeymoon phase starts to relax a little bit. Maybe we don't feel like the fireworks going off like crazy, but in reality, we start to really feel a sense of our own inspiration, maybe beginning to wane a little bit, and possibly we start to find fault. We start to look for the fault in whatever it is that we're doing. So let's talk specifically around our yoga training as personal evolution, as leadership development, and as transformation. So it's in this phase of familiarity where we may start to let our old patterns, we start to let our old patterns out of the gate. Our old patterns, those repetitive things that we may do over and over again that aren't particularly supportive, that may not be particularly beneficial. We may have some patterns of self-sabotage. We may have patterns of finding faults within ourselves or others. We may have a pattern where we tend to really become more judgmental. It's like whatever that pattern is, that usually in that phase of familiarity, those old patterns start to come forward. And it's in that phase for most people that they start to do one of two things. They either begin to control or force their training, their transformation, their leadership development. Like they just say, oh no, I started a thing, I've got to finish a thing, so I'm just going to force it, or they try to control it. Or the other side, kind of the other extreme side of the coin, is that then excuses start being made. Like we actually start gathering evidence maybe for where we're not worthy, or we start gathering evidence for whatever it is that might be challenging us, whatever the training program or whatever the part of our studentship is. We start gathering evidence for maybe where we're not worthy, and we can actually begin to argue for our limitations. So it's in that place that we start to see one of those two things happen. Well, so we have the first phase being honeymoon phase. The next is familiarity, where in there we start to see old patterns coming forward. We may see ourselves getting into old grooves, and we start either making excuses, finding fault in the process, or we try to control or we try to force. Now the third phase is a really important one and can be a little tough sometimes. Not that the other ones are so much easier, but I call this the stage of choice point. We come to a point and some choices need to be made. Now it does often come up in the guise of gathering evidence for how something's not working, because if it's coming up under our old patterns, we start to say things like, well, the universe has given me signs that this isn't the best thing for me to do, or I've got all these signs coming forward. There's a lot of different different phrases that I hear, or different phrases that we'll often use, and that will bring into that third phase, that's choice point, and we really feel we're making an informed decision, but in fact, it's simply old patterns. What I'm talking about here in this phase is that when we start to see it as a true choice point, if we're going to say no to being truly a student, to truly being teachable, if we're going to put the brakes on, if we're going to say no to it, we want to be really, really clear what we're saying no to. Or there's this, and we may continue, we may say no, may say no more, I don't want to be this student anymore, or I don't want to be it in this way. But then the other option or the other choice is that it's at that time that we start to say, okay, so if I'm really going to experience the benefits of this training, if I'm going to experience the benefits of being a student, if I'm really going to start to step into a true process of transformation, I'm going to have to make a choice. And that choice, it comes in the form of commitment, of making a true commitment to yourself, to your training, to the path. And it's at this third phase, this choice points phase, that if we choose to make that commitment, we have to start getting really honest with ourselves and how teachable we really are. And then we want to begin to make a commitment to become teachable, to truly become an authentic student. And it's really, really important that in this place that we start to learn what humility is. And we'll go into that a little bit more later. But it's really at this phase that at the choice point, we want to start to establish a true commitment to ourselves, to our path. We want to really start to realize that we're going to have to develop the tenacity, the perseverance, and consistency is key. You know, oftentimes that consistency is where we can really begin to lose interest, because it can feel so difficult of doing the same thing over and over again. Things that might seem quite simple, or we may not feel like we're making any progress at all. But commitment, tenacity, perseverance, and consistency is key. And that comes under that third stage of the student, or the third phase of the student, the processes that we all go through. And that leads us quite naturally into 4. The 4th stage I call mature relationship. It's when we're really, we've made this commitment, we've developed the tenacity, we're becoming more consistent, and this next stage, it's where we start to mature in our relationship, really with ourselves. We start to mature in our relationship with ourselves. We start to mature more in the inner dialogue and the thoughts that we're willing to entertain and the thoughts that we're not willing to entertain. And the other very important point around this is that we develop a more mature relationship with our source, with our Creator. And what that means is that we must develop clarity around the perception of our source, of our Creator. And this is really a very important part of entering into a more mature, sustainable relationship with ourselves. Because what our perception of our source or our Creator is going to be the perception, how we view the world, how we perceive the world, how we relate to people in our relationship. If I view my source, my Creator, as punishing, as harmful, as, you know, just waiting to do me in if I make any mistake, you know, that I've got to get the approval of my source or my Creator. If I'm living in that way, that I'm going to, my relationship with myself is going to be like that, and my relationship with others, which means we're going to have a more shallow relationship. And those that are really hooked in that, kind of stuck in that stage of more shallow relationships with themselves or others, they get what I call aha addiction, and they want to always be in the first stage. It's like the first stage, which is the honeymoon stage. In other words, it's always, let's start the new honeymoon again. Let's start the new honeymoon again. Because it's at this point that we start to really see what our real view of the world is, what our view of where we came from. And it colors the way we see ourselves, it colors the way we see others, and it comes back to the idea that we really don't see the world or others how they really are. We see others where we are. And if we view our source, our Creator, as punishing or something external from us that we are waiting to get approval from, or we're waiting to be punished by, then we're going to view not only ourselves that way, but we're going to view others that way as well. So this 4th stage that comes just after choice point, mature relationship with yourself, with your source, this is the place where it's important that you become really clear on what your perception is, and being willing to make a shift to starting to see what it would be like if your perception was that your source or your Creator wishes or wants the best for you, and that you yourself start to see your own value, which takes us to the next phase. The next phase or stage of the student, which is 5, I have value. So we have so far honeymoon, familiarity, we have the choice point, we have the mature relationship, and now we're on number 5, which is value. So from this place, we start to move into a stage where we start to see our own value. See, from that place where we see that we're just some sort of entity being judged, and we're either going to get a pat on the back or we're somehow wrong, we're not really seeing the essence of our true value. And it's imperative that we all come into this next phase or this next stage of seeing our own value. As we start to see our own value, as you begin to realize your own value, then you start to ponder the idea that maybe you're here for something more. Just maybe you were born for a reason. that there is something within you that the world needs, your community needs, something within you that your family needs, something within you that you must see. But this stage is incredibly important. Value, the ability to begin to value yourself, and seeing the value of yourself, you begin to see the value in others. So it's quite naturally that as you see that in yourself, you start to see that in others. So the next phase is from value is teaching. For everyone, in every point in time, to be able to master a thing, we must be able to teach it. And this is where I'm telling you, I am walking my talk. This is not easy for me. I've taught a lot. I've taught thousands upon thousands of hours to people. I've stood in front of large groups of people and I've spoken and I've taught, but never in front of a camera with people around me working the technical things and not receiving that immediate feedback. So this is very new for me. And I felt very nervous. You know, as Carrie came in today and I was upstairs and I was going over my notes, I said, wow, I'm really nervous. I know what it feels like. It reminds me of what it feels like when I first started teaching. I was feeling the heat and, you know, feel perspiring and different things. But there comes a point in time, my friends, there comes a point in time that to master anything and that to truly master what it means to experience our own transformation, to be a student of life, to be a yoga student, there comes a time that we must teach. We have to be able to run the information through us. We have to be able to take the discipline, the trainings, the things that we've learned, and we have to begin to practice articulating it. It doesn't mean you need to know everything, and it doesn't mean that you have to have it perfect. I'm a living example right here, right now. I am so grateful to be here in front of you, but I gotta tell you, it was scary. But we cannot let fear stop us. It's for many of you that were in class with me yesterday. I apologize for some of you that weren't there, but for many of you that were in class with me yesterday when I was talking about levels of sound and talking about how we have words in our mind and we have words that come through our mouth, but it's really when sound becomes an experience and it's at the very level of our vibration. It becomes, the teachings become our frequency. And it's only through practice. It's only through just doing it. And we've got to walk through that door where it's messy. And we're living it today. And I am grateful to be able to move forward to this next step, to teach to you in this way, to be challenged at this level. I am grateful for Carrie and for Emily, our new intern, and grateful for all of you for showing up. So I want to share with you all that next stage of being the student is we must begin to see ourselves as a teacher. And even in the beginning, if it's like, oh my God, I could never be able to share with another using my voice, it's a skill that you learn. And you've got to go through the doorway of simply doing it. But it's how you take that phase that stage that came just before this, where you're beginning to see your value. I'm here in front of you now because I know my own value. I know what I have to offer. And I'm very clear on those things that came just before this. That while it may, when you're teaching or when I'm teaching, that it may come up messy or it may feel scary, when you know your own value, you do it anyway. You speak it anyway. And it's through doing it again and again and again that quite naturally you develop into a leader. You develop into an entrepreneur. And it's interesting, the next phase or the next stage that I call the leadership entrepreneurial stage. And I had a lot of fun because I've never, I love to look up the etymology of words, and I've never really, for any reason, wanted to look up the word leader because I thought that is so obvious. I think everybody knows, everybody can kind of get a sense of that. But again, to my surprise, it was so beautiful. It's a French origin, the word leader. And the first part, L-E-A, means path. And the second part, D-E-R, means finder. So leader is finder of the path. And I was just blown away. And so I realized why I'm so drawn to the word leader and to the word leadership, the finder of the path. Equally as incredibly beautiful is the origins of the word entrepreneur, also a French word. And in its earliest origins, entrepreneur meant to undertake something, to undertake a project. And it's not like undertake like undertaker, it's like undertake like to step into something that's needed and to be willing to be a force for it. It's the idea that you move underneath it and you move things forward. And even so much as the original origins today in modern teachings of positive psychology, they're actually coining the phrase social entrepreneurship. And in a report done by Duke University, and I'm just going to give particular points on it that I found of course I find it astonishing because it's in agreement with everything that I'm teaching, right? Isn't that true? We love everything that's in agreement. But I found it so incredibly interesting that social entrepreneurship, that they're truly seeing it as the future for all people, that all people quite naturally as a stage of evolution or a process of evolution is that our dharma, just like the yoga word dharma is purpose. We all have a purpose, and social entrepreneurship is part of that. But the idea is that now we begin to see something, we see a project, we see something that's needed, and we move into it, and we do what it takes to move the forces that it takes to bring people together for whatever it is that's needed. And another word that was associated with entrepreneur that I loved was adventurer. Isn't that so cool? I fell in love with that. It's like, because I've always considered myself quite an adventurer, and most definitely a leader, and most definitely an entrepreneur. But it's adventurer in that the adventurer looks at new landscapes, may take a look at something that is currently not yielding anything useful or beneficial, or maybe could be more useful or beneficial. And the social entrepreneur, or the adventurer, looks at the landscape of whatever it might be, takes a look at it and says, okay, let's take this lower yield and let's raise its yield. And so the social entrepreneur, as they're looking at it today in positive psychology, I can really see its congruency with yogic alchemy, Rasa Vidya. And the definition of Rasa Vidya, or yogic alchemy, is to be able to take a lower yield energetic form and to raise its yield, to raise its energetic yield. And it's like yoga quintessentially is leadership and entrepreneurship training, and that I have called it our 7th stage of the student. And we're all moving in that direction. And it's through that we're meant to continually grow. We're meant to continually expand, to bring what it is that we have to offer to the world, from seeing our own value, from that matured relationship, coming from that point where we're not sure but we have to make a choice, coming to what may seem like the ordinary or the mundane familiarity, from that point where it's like, where were the good old days, the honeymoon phase? Well, the honeymoon phase isn't meant to last. It's a more mature phase. It's necessary. It's like the initial spark that gets things going. But through all of those phases, through honeymoon, familiarity, choice point, to mature relationship, to knowing your own value, to becoming the teacher, to moving into leadership and entrepreneurship. And this, my friends, is what it means to live a successful life. And in this 6-week course, my prayer is that I would like to bring to you the opportunity to know that at the end of this 6 weeks, that you begin to evolve into that. But make no mistake about it, this isn't a straight movement forward. And many of you that are students of mine already know this as well. that we may go back and forth, from familiarity to honeymoon, and where, we want it so much, and we might find ourselves holding on a bit, or at that choice point for mature relationships. So it's not as simple as just looking at the target and it's a straight shot. It's a matter of setting the target, and it's a matter of taking the shot, missing the target, and keeping the target where it is, but staying very, very focused on where it is that we're going. Now, through all of this, through this next 6 weeks, I want to encourage you that from our time together, I want to encourage you to journal. I'm going to offer different opportunities at the end of our time today for things that you can journal on, and I will also offer you my cell phone number as well, so you can send questions to me or text questions to me, and I'll be happy to respond as soon as possible. Now, from this state of the stage of leadership and entrepreneurship, there are next steps that we begin to take in our transformation. And from here, I would like to define these steps for you. So the first thing is that we've got to learn to cultivate humility. Humility truly is the heart and soul of development. Humility is where we learn to let go of control. In other words, we stop being so attached to the outcome, and we start being able to let go of control and to really trust the circumstances, to trust the process. The next thing is that we must be willing to face the reality of our current experience. This one can be tough because we go from humility, letting go of control, that we have to be willing to look at where we've gotten ourselves up to this point. We must be willing to face the reality of our current experience. But I want to move forward very quickly to 3, because from there, as we accept the reality of our current experience, we have to be able to accept responsibility. Because it's from this place that we must understand and realize that everything in our world, it is an outpicturing of the way that we think, of the way that we process and we move our emotions, and of the way that we show up in our world. So we must be willing to accept responsibility, from being willing to face our reality, from the cultivation of humility and letting go of control. The next one is discipline. We've got to cultivate the discipline. But let me say, the word discipline has nothing to do with punishment or the way that we in our culture often look at discipline. Think of the word discipline as becoming a disciple into your own life, to truly humbling yourself to the process of what it takes for you to be able to move through the things that you might need to move through in life that can feel a bit painful. And within discipline, there's 2 Sanskrit words that are really important. Tapas, which is, think of that like turning up the heat on our lives. In other words, being challenged. This is where a teacher comes in. We must have a teacher. We must find a teacher. For many of you on here, you're currently already students, but we must find a teacher that has our best interest at heart and has the capacity to hold our best interest at heart, but also has the capacity to give us the objective feedback that we need from a very spiritually informed presence, and one that can really hold a strong space, that can really hold that bhavana or feeling tone that we need. And then the other Sanskrit word is santosha. This is still all under discipline. Santosha is contentment. We want to take care that as we're going through this process, that we understand that there's nothing inherently wrong with you. There's nothing within you that needs to be fixed, or like that there is a problem with you inherently. We must be able to develop a certain degree of contentment with where we are, while at the same time it's coupled with the tapas, with the discipline, along with having a teacher in our lives. This is also the place that we want to become very clear on 3 vital things that we must do each day. I'm not talking about just something on your task list, but I want you to think in terms of This is a great story that I heard, and I used to actually work in emergency room and intensive care. And when they would bring somebody in a traumatic situation, a person could have a bone sticking out of their arm or a bone sticking out of their leg. But if it looked like they might be unconscious, they weren't really going to pay attention to that. There were 3 vital functions. They're going to take a look at brain functioning, they're going to take a look at breath, and they're going to take a look at cardiovascular, if their heart's beating. What are your 3 vital functions? And if you would, please, you'll want to take care and list those between now and when we're together next week. 3 vital functions, 3 things each day. 5, it requires visible belief. You must believe. You've got to be able to draw the invisible into the visible, or to be able to manifest a thing. We must understand that we have to have the capacity to believe in ourselves and to believe and to know that everything is working out for good. And that'll be a very important part of the process, to be able to see. And I know in my notes I put see, like all caps, that we have to become also still enough to be able to see that potential. And that's what I refer to as visible belief, to be able to see your own potential in the now. Not as though something is wrong with you, but that there is something more to you, something more than you can even begin to imagine. And this is the place that we start looking at a vision, a mission statement, which I'll talk about all these things in these coming 6 weeks. And we must be teachable. So this is number 6. We have to have the ability to be teachable. We want to take a look at our own teachability. And we also want to be able to look at what we perceive as our failures as opportunities for learning. We can't be afraid to learn. In other words, we can't be afraid to fail. We have to be willing to fail so we can learn. Very important that to be able to learn, we must fail. But it's from learning that we're able to lead, that we're able to teach, that we're able to transform into that entrepreneurship. It's important to know, finally, number 7, that winning, success, attainment, yeah, they're great. I mean, I gotta admit, I love to win. I love to feel successful. I love to feel like that I have really reached my goals or attained something. But the truth is that what I have learned is more important than anything, because there's not a thing that I'm gonna attain that I'll take with me when it's time for me to take my last breath. But whatever it is I've learned, in whatever ways that I've evolved, there's no one that can take that from me. Those are my principles. Those are something that will stay with me always and forever. And so I want to encourage you all to kind of re-listen to this, re-watch it, and because this is recorded, take down notes, because I seek to build on this and to build on this opening that I've offered to you today. I know I've given lots of information, but I seek to build on this and break these down each week. So before I open up for a couple of questions, we'll have time for a few. I just want to remind you, take some time this week, list your 3 vital functions, things that you need to do each and every day. Remembering the sort of the trauma analogy that I used of the mind, the heart, and breath. I want you to take a little time and journal. What would your absolute preferred days look like? What would it look like when you wake up in the morning? How free would you feel? How would you contribute to others? Next, please journal about, do you have a vision? Do you have a mission? And begin to journal about that, what that might begin to look like. Also, please take a look at what you can do personally to begin to improve upon your training. If you don't have a teacher, consider finding a teacher. Please text me if you have any questions about that. But make sure that you find a teacher, and if you feel like, I could improve as a student, and if you already are my student, we can have a conversation about that, and I'm so happy to support you on your journey. Take a look daily around what types of thoughts you're moving through your mind. take a look at your actions and take a look at what it is you're consuming in the form, not just food, but in the form of information and music and your surroundings and conversations. And finally, I'd like to just thank each and every one of you for being here. And I believe we have about 5 minutes for questions. And I am not completely certain just yet how that might occur. I think Carrie's going to open it up for you where you can potentially raise your hand and she will monitor that for me. If you have a question, please type that in and I will answer your questions to the best that I can in the last few minutes that we have. If there are any questions around some of the things that I covered, let's see. Oh, great question. So the question that we have is, can you explain the fifth, and I want to make sure that I'm right on that, the fifth stage, value. And that the stage of valuing yourself, and this comes just between developing to a more mature relationship with yourself and with your source, and the phase of the need to begin to teach. So this stage, you begin to realize your value. So many of us, we see the way that we value ourselves is based on what other people think of us. Or we value ourselves based on whether or not others approve of us. Or we value ourselves based on what we produce. We see ourselves as like, producing machines. In other words, the way that we hold our own personal value and the way that we value our presence is based externally. And when we value ourselves based on an external reference point, we begin to live all of our life that way. And so by finding our value through an external reference point, we also begin to value everyone else in that way as well. So the idea then is to, as you're going through the phases, as you're going through the stages as a student, is to begin to make a shift to where you start to, you yourself internally are able to truly feel your own value. This really isn't an intellectual exercise. We can't really intellectualize our own value. So I want you to take care with that to really see and understand your own value is an experience. It's a feeling tone that you will develop into as you go through the stages prior to that. I'll see if there's any more questions again. And please, if I'm not able to offer that, please feel free to send me a text as well. And I'll answer definitely what I can, or I'll hold it for the next time. And so I have a few another question that I'm not sure that I'm totally clear on, but I have a question. It says, I confuse this with seva sometimes, the fifth stage. I want to make sure that I'm completely understanding the question, but the way that I'm interpreting the question is that my value is based on what I do for you. My value is based on what I produce. I hope that I'm on point with that, and if I'm not, please let me know. But when we ourselves, let me come back. It's like when we start to see that, or when we start to have the capacity to see that we're valuing ourselves based on what we do for others, then we start to understand that we're living our lives based on an external referencing point. when we start to value ourselves, we start to find that we're able to do and offer things to others because it's a natural rising out of our own value. It's like our own cup is so full. You know, we're so full and we're living so abundantly that there's so much there to share with others. And that's when we really begin to know our own value. And it's like in that case, then we don't feel exhausted when we're performing seva or we're living as a karma yogi. Now let me say that one really important thing, that it is through living as a karma yogi or doing seva, doing for others, that we're able to, I mean, it is the quintessential way that we're able to see when we're externally referencing, because it'll show up in the form of resentment. Like we'll start to feel maybe resentful, we're doing things for people, or maybe you serve your teacher. Maybe you're serving your teacher, maybe you're serving your community, maybe your family, children, or your community, and you find yourself going, God, after all I've been doing for them, or you find yourself feeling resentful, or you're not getting that approval. You're like, I'm looking for some approval or acknowledgement. When one has really found their own value, and they've really shifted, authentically shifted from that place of internal referencing, while receiving approval or hearing the applause is enjoyable, it's a wonderful feedback system. It's not what defines you. It doesn't define you as a human being. It doesn't define your soul. It's not, you don't feel exhausted. You're not being pulled from one direction to the other. Yes, you may feel a really good and yummy tired at the end of the night where you've really earned that sleep, but there's not, the resentment's not there. And so karma yoga, or serving, is a great way to turn up the tapas, to turn up the heat, so that you can see where you are devaluing yourself. Because if you find yourself saying, they don't really value me, then you can really practice saying to yourself, I'm not really valuing me. Where am I not seeing my own value? Where am I not appreciating myself? And where am I not appreciating others? Because if I'm not really appreciating myself, it's impossible for me to appreciate others. So I believe at this point that we're just about, our time is just about up. And I want to say to you all how much I truly appreciate your presence. I'd like to share with you my cell phone number and also my email, so that you can feel free to send me a text. I won't always get back to it right away, because I'll generally set aside a time so that I'm not slaving away to my phone, but I'll generally set aside a time to be able to respond to your text. My cell phone number is 832-620-1316. My email is padmashakti, PADMASHAKTI @icloud.com. Again, thank you all so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you next week. Please listen again. Namaste.